All right, we're live. We are live on air for live chat number 21. Hello to everyone that is joining us for the Duran Live 21. If you can hear me, let me know in the chat that you can hear everything okay. And we welcome everybody, wherever you are in the world, to our 21st Sunday live chat. And I have with me from Moscow, host of RT's Crosstalk, the one, the only, Mr. Peter Lavelle.
Good to be
Peter,
here.
how are you?
Good to be here. Yep, great.
All right, great. If you guys can hear me, let me know in the chat so we can make sure the sound and the audio is working fine. And I have from the UK, not in London, but somewhere in the outskirts of London, we have the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. How are you, Alexander?
I'm very well, but not in the outskirts of London, far to the north of London, actually.
Far to the north of London. All right. Welcome, Alexander. Good to have you here. Hello from Arizona. Hello, Gloria. Good to have you here as well. All right, guys, let's begin with some of the questions that people sent in before we started this live chat. And let's begin with Peter from Afro Priapus wants to know what you think of the soft coup against Bolton, or the soft coup of Bolton.
It's still in
soft coup, so
yeah. Well, it's in play, and it's been in play for a while, ever since Donald Trump was president-elect. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Bolton now. It's only going to take a few reporters on the White House lawn for them to ask, and they will ask, is John Bolton trying to sabotage your Syria policy? And Trump, knowing Trump, he will tell the truth, okay? And I wouldn't be surprised that at some point over the next, if it hasn't happened already, John Bolton's taken to the woodshed for a good spanking, all right? Because when he went to Turkey and was shut out, humiliated, shut out, Erdogan did not want to speak to him directly. And instead, Erdogan spoke to Parliament and basically shredded Bolton and his ideas and sticking up by the side of Donald Trump. Speed up to the present, and even now, Bolton is grudgingly saying that he's talking, well, the U.S. is talking to the Russians dealing the Kurds. See, Bolton painted himself into a corner on the Kurds, okay? How many times did he ever say the word Kurd before all this happened, all right? So I think that it is in play, and what I've said, and what I said last week, we have to keep a very close eye on is the Republican hawks in the Senate, because if they don't go along with Trump, he is in very, very deep trouble. You know, if he doesn't get this wall, you know, he's toast. I mean, he knows it, okay? So the U.S. now is focused on its internal problems that will get worse and worse as the Democrats try to force Trump's hand here on every one issue after another. But the soft coup against Trump, it started when he took the oath, and it's continuing to the present.
All right, guys, remember to smash that like button and share the channel with everybody you know. That really helps out a lot, and it helps get the word out about the Duran channel. So thank you very much. And hello from Santa Lucia, and hello from Toronto. Great to have you here. Alexander, can you give us, Asma would like to know if you can give us an update on Idlib and the DMZ zone, if that's effective and if it's working.
No, it's not really working. What is happening in Idlib, in fact, is that the various commitments that the Turks made back in the autumn to the Russians about trying to control the various jihadi militant groups there, I mean, let's say straightforwardly, Al-Qaeda have not worked. Al-Qaeda has been gradually destroying all the rival groups in Idlib, and it has been launching attacks on Syrian government forces as well. Now, I think the Russians and the Syrians to some extent have been playing along with this for the moment, because their focus is exactly, as Peter said, on the situation with the Kurds in northeast Syria, this complicated situation with the United States, whether it's pulling out or not pulling out, what Bolton is doing, this row that Bolton has had with Erdogan and with the Turks, with Erdogan refusing to see Bolton. So that has been taking the focus of Idlib. But the situation in Idlib is very bad. the agreements are not sticking. The Turks have floated the idea of a joint peacekeeping force with the Russians, but at this moment, up to now, this situation has to some extent been put on the back burner. My own guess is what's probably going to happen eventually is that the Russians and the Turks will do a deal. The Russians will tell the Turks the Syrian government is going to take care of the Kurdish problem for you, which is the problem you really care about. We'll move into the Kurdish areas. They'll take control there. In return, you've got to accept that the Syrian government is also going to move into Idlib and regain control there too. It'll be a difficult thing for the Turks to accept. It'll be a very difficult thing personally for Erdogan to accept. But until that happens, the situation in Idlib is going to remain bad. And I have to say it again. Whenever jihadi groups are left to fight each other, as they have been doing, it is invariably the more militant, the more radical, the more ruthless that always come out on top.
All right. Thank you, Alexander. Peter, yes.
Well, I was just going to say that from October to the present, the Turks haven't kept any of their agreements at all. And the Russians are very, very wary of this. Alexander Mercouris is absolutely right. If the Russians and the Turks agree upon something, the Russians will make sure it's bulletproof, okay? They're not going to take any chances because they have a prestige and resource issue to worry about as well.
All right, guys, I'm reading the chat, and I've also read a lot of the comments that we have on videos on the notifications. I just want to take a minute to go over that. I know that there are notifications that are not, you know, you click that notification bell, you subscribe, and a lot of times the notifications are not coming. I don't know why either. I'm not going to make any guesses or throw any theories out. The best that we can do is subscribe to the channel, click the notifications bell, and when we do announce the live chat, which is usually the day before, click that reminder button on the page that the live chat is posted on. Hopefully the notification comes. If it doesn't, we will try to find other ways. Maybe we'll send out an email to our mailing list to let them know about the live chat as well. We do realize that for some reason, a lot of the notifications are not getting sent out. We apologize, and we'll try to figure out other ways to keep you guys informed as to when we're having the live chats. Usually we have them on Sunday. We've been pretty good about having them on Sunday, every Sunday. And get on our mailing list. We'll try to send out an email as well to remind everybody, but hopefully that notification problem gets solved. So I do know what's going on, and thank you guys for letting us know about the notification issue when we are doing these live chats and when we're having videos as well. When we post our videos, sometimes the notification doesn't get out there. Just visit our page and just try to keep on top of it, and we'll also try to find ways to remind you so you can keep on top of it. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us today and for letting us know about the problem. Let's get moving now to questions before we started this live chat that people sent in. Peter, Andrew Webb would like to know, where does the deep state start and end, in your opinion? It's a good question.
It's a good question. It's all pervasive. What's interesting about it is that, of course, you're going to have the intelligence community. I mean, that's the core of it. And but what's made, I remember deep state was for conspiracy theorists, remember? But in December 2016, it was a banner headline at the New York Times. And I remember doing a crosstalk and being astounded that they would actually start, the officialdom would start using the term deep state. What is fascinating about the deep state is how its tentacles can get into media, into Hollywood, into every form of life. We know from this integrity initiative, what is such an Orwellian thing. I mean, there are little clusters of journalists and influencers and Twitter people and all of that. That's what the deep state is. It's one huge web of connections. And what it is also is that, look at Democrats when they're on CNN and MSNBC. Aren't you astounded that they all say exactly the same thing when it comes to the wall, when it comes to Russia, when it comes to Syria, it's almost as if an email is sent out all to these people and they repeat it. And this is what, this is what we had with Operation Mockingbird, okay, during the Cold War, where you had initiatives and ideas and talking points. They didn't call them talking points then, they call it now. But, to make sure that people echo endlessly the same message over and over again. And it's so patently obvious that is happening right now. There's no even sophistication about it anymore. I mean, it's almost as if it's their clandestine behavior is transparent. I mean, and then you have people like Ed Lucas over at The Economist and other people, and they're caught out in this integrity initiative, and they just say, because it's for the higher good. They don't deny it. They don't deny it. Okay, I think some people, and I'm not going to name names because I don't have them in front of me, but I think a number of people were really embarrassed that they're supposed to be independent scholars. No, they're smack in the middle of all of this stuff, and people are paid. Okay, it's a lucrative way to get send an invoice. Okay, and it goes from mainstream media all the way down to websites, and there are certainly websites out there that claim one thing but are actually pushing a very different agenda. That is all done intentionally to confuse people like ourselves, or hopefully we'll pick up on fake news and repeat it. I think people that watch this podcast on a regular basis, we are very careful, and we're consciously careful about what we say, because we know there's a lot of people out there that want to trip us up.
Can I just quickly say, I've noticed that one thing that's been happening over the last couple of months is that this new expression has started to gain currency. In place of the deep state, people are talking about the blob. I noticed that Paul Robinson, who's a very high-powered academic in Canada, now talks about the blob. I prefer the word deep state. I think this is a much more accurate and precise meaning and descriptive meaning of what we're talking about. Well, and Peter's absolutely right. It includes the intelligence services, people in the foreign policy establishment, other people in the bureaucracy, some politicians.
Academia as well.
And of course, private industry, the arms companies, the various NGOs that exist now, the various think tanks that exist now. We're talking about a lot of people.
Yeah. Alexander, how would Turkey react if there's a U.S. war against Iran? Would NATO survive?
I think that NATO would probably survive, because it depends how that war was waged. If the United States does it by itself, I think there'd be a lot of upset and dismay in Europe. And I think you'd probably see big protests in Europe. I don't think you'd be seeing immediately people pulling out of NATO. I think if the United States tried to get NATO countries, especially Germany, involved in such a war, then I think we would be looking at a completely different situation. And I have to say, I don't think that's impossible, because a war of that nature would be a total and complete disaster. It would very easily spiral out of control. And I think that if we ever found ourselves in that kind of situation, as I said, you could very easily see it having major repercussions in Europe, with NATO starting to break up. But I don't think we're there yet. So, let's not jump ahead of ourselves.
All right, Peter, Imre would like to know if you can give us something that's happening inside of Russia. Some news.
It's snowing, okay? This is Russia. This is January. It's cold. It's snowing. And it's a wonderful winter. It's stayed cold for a long time, my favorite. And when it stays cold for a long time, the sun shines. As far as politics are concerned, it's relatively quiet. And that's the way people like it. I came started living in Russia in the late 90s, and it was chaotic. I mean, almost to the point of surreal. It was bizarre what was going on. And I was working in finance, so I had a lot of money burning in my pocket. And so you could live a life hard and fast. And it's remarkably quiet right now. And I like it that way better. There's a sense of decency here and common discourse. So I don't want to be facetious here, but if you have a specific question about something, I'd be more than happy to answer it. But Russia is a normal country. So think of what is normal, and that's what's happening in Russia right now.
All right, Alexander, what about from Brand Account would like to have your view on the car bombing in Paris? Can this be ignored?
It can't be ignored, and any kind of violence and terrorist violence, which this almost certainly is, cannot be ignored. Again, let's not overanalyze it too quickly. Let's wait and see. There'll no doubt be an investigation. My very great concern, and everybody's concern, must be that there will be attempts to link it to the very difficult political situation in France, and that people on either side of the political barricades might use an incident like this in order to escalate even further a political situation which is very bad in France and which is deteriorating anyway.
Yeah, what we have to worry about is another Reichstag event where it gives the government, this would be used by the government to crack down even more on dissent. And they've already started doing that. I think it's starting Monday. New laws are being put into place to curb freedom of assembly. Let's be very clear about this. In France, technically speaking, you need a permit, and you have to contact the authorities where you want to have your demonstration. The reality up until the advent of the yellow vests was, if you're just not violent, and you don't register with the authorities, they pretty much, turn a blind eye. Okay, why do they want you to register? It's not to deter you, so they want to make sure you're protected, so the police can be there to make sure something doesn't go wrong. All right, but now because of the intensity of these protests, and I don't like it at all. From Antifa in America to the streets of Paris, I don't like when people wear ski masks. If you have something to say, show your face, okay? And I think that should be a prerequisite. All right, but again, we here do not condone any form of violence, okay? And when I saw at the Arc de Triomphe that people had taken a sledgehammer and took a few whacks at it, that is criminal behavior. That person should be held accountable. That's a cultural artifact. Okay?
Absolutely.
And you do not do that to cultural artifacts. Okay?
Absolutely.
You want to just destroy your own property. Okay, fine, that's your business. Okay, but that's part of the common heritage there. That's wrong. I condemn completely, emphatically, violence be used, because the yellow vests are on the right side of history, and don't spoil it, and don't let a small tiny group of people spoil it for you, because the government is waiting with bated breath to make sure you cannot protest your legitimate grievances.
All right, Reborn Through Hate and Pax Bella said that the car bombing may have been a gas leak. They heard reports that it was also a gas leak. So, I mean, there's varying reports. It could have been a gas leak as well. We'll just take the question that was asked.
That's why we need to wait and see.
Yeah, wait and see. Brand Account asked that question, so
but Peter, can I just quickly say, Peter's absolutely right. First of all, about violence. Violence is wrong intrinsically. It's certainly wrong in the situation in Paris, in France, and of course, it's also politically misconceived entirely in this situation. If it's prosecuted, it will only cause this movement to split and eventually break down, and it will give the authorities the reason they're looking for to crack down on it ferociously. And the whole trend coming out of the government now is very much one towards suppression. In other words, that they've made whatever concessions they're prepared to make, and now they're looking to shut it all down by bringing out the riot police and using the law and using the whole machinery of the state to close it down.
All right, guys, click that like button, share the channel with everybody. Let's spread the word. And once again, we apologize if notifications were not sent automatically. We had the live chat posted, and obviously something happened with the notifications, did not get sent out. But thank you for tuning in either way, and thank you for joining us in this live chat. Just click that like button, smash that like button, so we get the word out about the live show and the channel. Alexander, what do you make about the Huawei arrest in Poland for spying? What's behind the claim?
Well, this is
interesting. Ask 5 and note.
Yeah, because it's interesting because the Huawei has responded by sacking the person who was arrested and saying that this person brought Huawei into discredit. Now, I have to say, this all looks to me, in spite of that action by Huawei, as a part of a pattern now of trying to crack down on Huawei around the world. So, I mean, we've seen the arrest of its chief financial officer in Canada. We've seen various attempts to try and persuade Western businesses and Western companies and Western governments to stop using Chinese electronic software. And we've seen claims that the Chinese use this software for intelligence purposes. And now we see a Chinese executive arrested and charged for this. However, you know, the fact that that Huawei itself has taken that particular line with this person may suggest that there's more to this story than we yet know. So let's wait and see what comes out of it. But I mean, first of all, there is a general attack on Huawei, and it is interesting. The only thing we can say at the moment is that it's interesting that they've reacted in the way they have done.
All right, Peter. John Beasley would like to know, Peter, tell us about your watch collection. What are your 3 favorite watches? And also, Peter, can you comment, and I hope I get this right, Putin's watch collection? John Beasley says it's a black pan aqua lung black dial. I'm not sure if that's one of Putin's many watches.
One of many watches here, but I'm winding it right now, and let me see if I can show you. This is one that he wears very, very often. Let's see if I can get that.
All right. Yes.
His wrist. Okay. It's one. This is exactly what he wears, except for on his there's a moon calendar. This one has the seconds down there, but that seems different. That's the reason why I got this. Okay, so I wear Putin's watch. Okay, but
Patek Philippe, Peter.
Yeah, and another one that Vladimir Putin wears. This is I'm showing the brand, not the watch itself. He has a very special soft spot for IWC watches, which I do as well. It's one of my favorite marks. Also. You'll notice that I like tourbillons a lot. This Cartier here is one of my favorites as well. So, but Putin, it's interesting the question here, because every time I see Putin, you know, at his Q&As, or if I see him in person, I always check out his watch. And when he came to RT, I sat next to him for about an hour and a half when we did our Q&A with him, and he was sitting next to me. And of course, I wear my watch on my left hand, but he wears it on the right. So I had my hand out on the desk, and he had his out, and he looked at my watch a couple of times, I have to admit. So he has a soft spot for watches.
All right, Jack Weber would like to know, Peter, where do you get these watches? Where can you get these watches that Putin has, for example? Where can they be bought?
I have a lot of money, and then you can buy them. Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, they're very expensive. I mean, most of the major brands, upmarket brands, they have boutiques in Moscow. And if you don't, then you can. Then there's this world of watch brokers out there. And basically, it's really interesting. My experience in 20 years in collecting watches is the watch brokers. It's kind of like the diamond exchange in was it Rotterdam or Amsterdam? I'm not sure which city it is, but there's a lot of trust. Okay. So, I mean, you're not going to get ripped off. There are very few people. I have never been ripped off by a watch broker. And sometimes we're talking large sums of money. And if something goes wrong, everything is taken care of. Your money is returned to you. If there's any kind of repair issue, the guarantee, you can go back to the broker and they can take care of it for you. So it's a neat group of people, okay? But basically have a lot of money. That's the solution to having a nice watch collection. And be very careful, and what you need is if you I have a few Rolexes. It's not my favorite brand, but you have to be very careful that fakes don't get mixed in, okay? And that's why you need to have, if you're not buying it from a boutique, you need to have a trusted broker and just be able to say, this is not real, okay? And they can figure it out in 15 seconds. Like they know what they're talking about. To a layman, lots of people buy fake watches. They don't even know they're fake, okay? So no, it's my passion. It's just my thing. It's watches, bow ties, glasses, and shoes. Okay, my fetishes. Okay.
All right, excellent. Are there any watches that are made in Russia, Peter Alexander?
Yeah, there are. There's a new brand come out. It's called Nika, and they're exquisite. I mean, wow, they're really cool. And this is really a legacy of the Soviet Union, because Soviet watches, it was like pocket watches from Soviet watch factory number 11. That was their marketing. Okay, I mean, none. All right. And what the Russians have found out the hard way, and are still finding out, is that because of the lack of marketing, there's no brand awareness. Okay, and so you have to spend enormous sums of money. Because let's take the example of a Rolex. It's a nice watch. Okay, no major criticism, but it's not particularly special. All right, but marketing tells you it is. It's an okay watch, but in the scheme of things, it's kind of in the middle. I mean, it's like having a Mercedes-Benz, have a Rolex, but there's a lot of watchmakers out there that are so amazingly innovative and doing new things. It makes a Rolex look like not interesting at all. Okay, so. If you want to get into it, make sure you deal with people that know what they're talking about. Okay, and I'm hopefully this year I will order all the parts to make my own pocket watch. I will put it together myself and with help. Okay, but it's expensive, but it's really exciting, the thought of making my own pocket watch.
All right, excellent, very cool, very cool. Alexander, let's shift gears to a question from Broken Spine 66, a comment about the attempted murder of AfD politician Frank Magnitz in Germany. And I also know that you're also a watch fan as well, Alexander. So you can also comment.
Not on Peter's scale. In fact, can I just say I've got two good watches. One is a Vacheron Constantin, which was given by my father. The other is a Longines, which is given to me by Peter. So I'm afraid Peter is the reason why I wear half the reasons why I wear good watches.
All right, let's get to Germany and the attempted murder of AfD politician Frank Magnitz.
Yes, I think this is actually a huge story. I mean, it ought to be an immense story, and it's remarkable how little attention it's got around the world. Yeah. Just imagine if this had been a top green politician in Germany attacked by right-wing thugs and beaten within an inch of his or her life. I absolutely guarantee to you that if that had been the case, this would have been a huge story. And of course, because it's an AfD politician, it's not. Can I come back to what Peter was saying before about us unequivocally condemning violence? This is a brutal and violent incident. It should be unequivocally condemned. It shows also that the situation in Germany in this respect is becoming very fraught. I am sure it will rally support further to the AfD. And of course, bear in mind that Germany at this precise point in time is probably in recession. That recession is probably going to get worse. The German finance ministry has said that Germany may struggle to keep its budget in surplus or even in balance over the next couple of years, despite the fact that the Germans have landed themselves with this law which requires them to keep their budget in surplus or in balance. So, I hope this incident is not a precursor of worse to come in a situation in Germany which is not looking as stable as it was even a year ago.
You know, it's very interesting too with this attempted murder, and I think Alexander Mercouris is absolutely right bringing up these budgetary issues. I think we have to point out to our viewers that the Germans are fanatical about those kinds of things. That's why Berlin is looking at Paris with dismay, because Macron, to save his own political skin, is loosening up the budget, and the Germans said, you know, the Germans and the French had agreed that they would not do that. Now, I'm not advocating austerity. I'm just saying this is what they agreed to. The French are falling down on it, and now the Germans may find them, and that this kind of economic and financial instability is something that is an anathema to the Germans, and it will have a very strong psychological effect on them.
Okay, we have a question from Kirsten. Peter, what department of the U.S. government starts wars? What is your best guess as to where the next war will be? And we got a couple of options for you: Ukraine, Iran, China. And finally, how can the U.S. afford such wars?
Well, where do wars come from? Well, essentially, they are generated, and they can be within the intelligence community itself, identifying a threat. More likely than not, it's going to be on K Street. That's where all the think tanks and NGOs and things like that, you could probably fill up, think of your own apartment. You could easily fill that up with white papers that Iran is a threat to the world, okay? Over and over and over again. So these threats are generated really. The only real thing, I mean, Ukraine, that could be easily diffused, okay, if the West would stop backing the Poroshenko government, okay, and told it to clean up its act, to actually reform the economy, implement not necessarily IMF or World Bank requirements, but to tackle corruption. Okay, come on, it's 5 years now, 5 years, and there's more corruption there now than ever before. But there's no political will in the West, and they will let that continue to be a quagmire because they want it to be a quagmire. It is a cudgel to hit Russia. It has nothing to do with the well-being of the Ukrainian people at all. Okay, and look, and Poroshenko, and we have the defense ministry in the UK. It looks like they quite gladly want to generate another provocation around Crimea. Okay, because remember, in the UK, and it's a difficult spot for Alexander Mercouris, because I don't want to talk about Brexit. He will. Okay, once have Brexit. Now the UK is going to have to start going out on its own. It's not going to be a reflection of the European Union. Its foreign policy is fleckless and weak and quite frankly stupid most of the time. And with China, and I would encourage everyone to look at the Thucydides trap that Alexander Christoforou and I did. I thought it was a really good video. That is where a potential conflict can happen, but it will be a conflict that will be pushed by the United States, not by China.
All right, and let's move on now to some topics in the chat. And questions from Atromitos and Stefan Stane. And we also, and this ties into a question just asked by John Dukas as well. Alexander, I sent you guys a WhatsApp message before we did the show on Pavlos Kamenos resigning from the Tsipras government. And the question that was asked was an update on the FIROM vote to change the name to North Macedonia. The Greek parliament now will also have their vote as well, whether the deal in Prespa, the agreement in Prespa will go through and the name change will go through. And of course, the new state called North Macedonia will eventually get voted into NATO. Alexander, what's your take on this? And let me read to you John Dukas's question as well, so you can get a full picture as to what everyone is. We have a lot of people asking about this this news topic. And John Dukas wants to know, good morning, guys, from Brooklyn, New York. My question is to Mr. Alexander Mercouris. Today, the Greek defense minister resigned over the Macedonian issue. Where do you think the Macedonian thing is heading? That is my exact question to you as well, Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, the very latest news that I've heard, I'm not absolutely sure this is right, but what I've heard is that Tsipras is actually going to set down a vote of confidence in the Greek parliament. Now, without Kamenos' support, I don't think he has a majority. I'm not sure about this, but I think The position of the Greek government is now looking very precarious. We could very well see the government fall, in which case there could very well be a general election. Now, if that happens and Tsipras loses, and I find it impossible to believe that he can do anything else but lose. I mean, I struggle to understand why there are people still prepared to vote for him. But on the assumption that he loses, and we have an entirely new government, which would be a government led by New Democracy, they are at the moment committed to voting down this name change. Now, I have to qualify this by saying that in Greece, we've repeatedly seen situations where people promise one thing in opposition and do something completely different when they come to power. Tsipras is the most extreme example of this. He said that he wouldn't impose further austerity on the Greeks and that he'd stand up to the European Union. He capitulated to the European Union, and of course, he imposed far more austerity on Greece than anyone else had done. Now, I have to say, though, feeling in Greece is running very high on this issue. I think for many reasons. Firstly, for a good nationalist reason, which is that there is concern about what is coming with Macedonia and whether North Macedonia, calling it North Macedonia, might open the way to saying, well, Greek Macedonia is actually South Macedonia, and so logically the two Macedonias ought to be brought together, and that might mean separating it from Greece, which is what some people in Fyrom, this republic, are known to want. So, I mean, there is that opposition in Greece also. I think there's also a very, very strong feeling in Greece amongst many, many people that Greece has been pushed around far too much. It's been accepting this one demand upon it after another, and the time has come to say no and to say stop, and not to play a game which isn't really in Greece's interests, but is very much to bring Fyrom, as Alex says, into NATO and into the Western system. And this is basically more pursuing American interests than Greek interests, with Greece once again being asked to sacrifice its interests for those of the United States and those of the Western alliance. So there are lots of issues crystallizing in Greece, but the political class in Greece can never be entirely trusted. So though I think we will probably see an election soon, sooner rather than later, I think it is unlikely this thing will pass through the parliament now. I'm sorry to say this, I cannot say with any confidence that on the other side of an election, this thing won't happen. Now, Alex, you also, I know, are following the story very carefully. I don't know what your thoughts about it are.
Look, let me say a couple of things. I was in Greece just the other day, and I spent some significant time there. A couple of things about what's going on. Merkel made an appearance in Athens, and it was met with a lot of protests on the street. The center was shut down, the metro was shut down, and people were extremely upset that Merkel came to oversee what she considers, in my opinion, she oversaw her colony. And that is how Germany is approaching Greece. The Greeks have been literally humiliated and beaten down for the better part of 10 years. The austerity has not ended. People there's still a 38.5% unemployment rate for Greek youth under 25. The salaries have dropped to the point where if you're getting a salary of 400 euros a month, 500 euros a month, you are extremely happy that you're getting that type of salary. So the issue with Fyrom is very sensitive to Greeks. It's very sensitive to the Greeks in Thessaloniki and in the state of Macedonia, which is where Thessaloniki is. And Greeks are afraid of this change that is taking place. Alexander rightly said that it could lead to a conflict further down the road. Let's not forget that Albanians in the north of Greece, there's also a claim that Albania has for a greater Albania, and they're claiming land as well that is in the north of Greece. So the whole area of the Balkans is a very it's dynamite, guys. I mean, it's dynamite. But the Greeks, there is no doubt that the Greeks will not put up with this stuff. Greeks are very patriotic, and they will defend their land and their history to the very, very last, to the very end, to the very last man. They will do so. Now, there was also news today, Alexander. I was reading it right before it came on the show that the New Democracy Party is now, the press came out with leaks saying that New Democracy was sending text messages to Anel ministers, trying to get them to vote against the Macedonian, the North Macedonian vote that's going to come up to Parliament towards the end of the month. So that's also been leaked, and now there's a whole nother side story to this drama before the vote comes, saying that the New Democracy was trying to scare MPs to voting against the proposal to allow the name change to go through. So I mean, there's all kinds of side stories. There's all kinds of scandals around this name change. It's a very complicated situation, and it's something that we really need to keep an eye out for. I agree with you, Alexander. If North Macedonian name does get changed, and if North Macedonia does go into NATO, we could be looking at all kinds of troubles for Greece and all kinds of territorial disputes in the future. Right now, you can say everything's hunky-dory and everything's fine, but you never know 5, 10, 20 years from now when those land claims in North Macedonia saying, you know, the South is also ours. And let's not forget Albania also making the same claims as well. And we're talking about a region that has been historically very, very turbulent. Peter, I don't know if you have any comments to make about the region in general and the Balkans. It needs to be handled with care.
Yes, with amazing care. I mean, this is the origins of the First World War in that region right there, and because of its instability here, what gave it the veneer of stability was the Cold War. Because it submerged all of these festering issues. It literally quite froze them. And with the end of it, of the Cold War, and the rise again of national, I don't want to say nationalism per se, but of awareness of one's nation and the importance of it. And Greece, of all countries, has been battered and humiliated so much by its so-called friends. And there are plenty of people that see a trend right here, and they're going to, I mean, look, Kosovo was created illegally, okay? That precedent is going to haunt us for a very long time, because it sent a message that if you want self-determination, it's yours to take. And if you can find backers outside, like the United States, to push it, you can get it, okay? Breaking international law, destroying sovereign states. And the precedent that was set with Kosovo is being played out again. I mean, it was happening in to Serbs outside of Serbia. Again, we have this, there's a fear of ethnic cleansing. And because the countries that are pursuing these issues are friendly to NATO, they can get away with it. How often do you read about Serbs as minorities in the region in the New York Times? You just simply don't. You don't. Okay, because they don't have agency. Okay, they're not allowed. It's like the people of Crimea. They don't have any agency. Well, they certainly do, and they went for it. Okay, peacefully. I'm afraid surrounding Greece, it won't be peaceful, because there's a long history of violence and political violence.
Absolutely.
Can I just say one thing about the NATO issue? Because everyone thinks that NATO is this alliance that all these countries are going to stick up for each other. I was in Greece when the United States and when NATO was bombing the crap out of Serbia. And I was in Athens at the time. And let me just tell you guys, Greece is in NATO, but there were tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 people were on the street, and they were in front of the U.S. Embassy, and they were furious. There is a very, very close kinsmanship, a very, very close feeling that the Greeks have towards the Serbs and vice versa. Greece, as a NATO nation, did not support what the U.S. was doing in Serbia. And to this day, I have not seen protests that big in Athens condemning what Clinton was doing to Serbia. And I remember that very, very well. People were furious in Greece. I mean, absolutely furious about what was going on. Alexander.
No, absolutely. And can I just say, I was also a witness to those protests, and you are absolutely right. I just wanted to add to the list of countries that have been making territorial claims on Greece. Of course, the most powerful and dangerous country from a Greek point of view of all, which is Turkey. I mean, Erdogan's government has been making very aggressive noises about the Eastern Mediterranean. So the Greeks feel under a great deal of pressure. And Peter is absolutely right. The Balkans is a very combustible region. There are issues between Albania and Greece. There are issues between Kosovo and Bosnia and Serbia, with the Serbs feeling very humiliated and driven back, and with great justice. You see issues between Macedonia and Bulgaria. There are also conflicts further north between Hungary and Romania over Transylvania. And, you know, they are not live at the moment, but they could be. This is a dangerous region. And it's extraordinary to me. It never ceases to amaze me that Western political leaders and Western journalists never seem to see this. They never seem to understand that it is sometimes better to let these sleeping dogs lie than to start moving around and waking them up. Because, of course, if they do wake them up and the whole region explodes, which it is perfectly capable of doing, it's very difficult to see how that can work in the West's interests now, given that the West and NATO are in a much weaker position in the Balkans than they were in the 1990s, when the Russians basically acquiesced to many of the things that were happening in the 1990s, because Russia was very weak and incapable of asserting itself, but is no longer in that position any longer. So it's a very foolish, very reckless game. Is Macedonia really so important to NATO that it merits destabilizing the situation in Greece, setting the Balkans on fire just to get it into NATO? And no, it is not Russian meddling that is creating these problems. It is Western blundering that is creating these problems, and Western deafness to the realities of what people are saying who actually live there.
Right. You know, we have to remember Yugoslavia was designed very intentionally, is to be able to find ways of avoiding conflict, okay? Yeah. It was far from a perfect union, I agree. But look at, what was the first country that was internationally recognized as Yugoslavia was being torn up? Croatia. And which country did that? What was the first country that recognized Croatia? Germany did. The last country on the planet that should have done that, okay? Because they were, again, if you can find an outside patron, you can make a bid for self-determination. But making that bid encourages everyone else. And Alexander Mercouris used the operative word, blunder. One blunder after another.
Yeah. Let's get to some super chats. Raccoon, thank you for your super chat. We appreciate it. A super chat from Megawatt. Question to Peter. Why did Putin return to the presidency in 2012? Was it planned beforehand, or Medvedev turned out to be such a bad president?
Oh, I think future historians will probably tell us the real timeline there. I'll tell you, I've lived in Russia the entire time Putin has been in high politics. Okay. I think it was pretty clear that he would. It was an option for him to come back. All right. I think it's widely believed in Russia that Medvedev was a weak president. But you know, in all fairness to Medvedev, anyone that was going to follow Putin would seem weak. Okay. I mean, that's just the nature of the game right here. I really want to stress, and I know that you and Alexander Mercouris have done a video on this. It's not that Putin wants to stay in power. It's just that too many people don't want him to leave power. And he's a man of consensus. He's moderate to the extreme. Those that want to see him go, you better be careful what you wish for, because there's a lot of people in the political elites that are far less moderate. And that might not be good for Russia at the end of the day, certainly not for global security. So I'll leave it as that. I think that the option was left open, and it looked like it was necessary. Look, Medvedev botched the vote on Libya at the United Nations Security Council. Okay, and in all fairness, again to Medvedev, he had to deal with the global financial meltdown. He was in office then. Okay, and there was a lot of bruises here, being number 2 in Russian politics is the worst. It's better to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but not number 2.
Good point. Super chat from Afterglow. Alexander, Brexit. What the hell is happening?
Yeah, what the hell is happening?
Here we go. We were waiting.
What the hell is happening? Well,
okay, I'm gonna go do my wash and ironing. But I'll be listening. Okay.
It's one intrigue after another. Supposedly, we're going to get the vote on Theresa May's deal on Tuesday. I think it will go ahead. We were talking about it just before the program, the three of us, and I think on balance it will go ahead. I think there are too many risks now for Theresa May to pull it a second time, and she doesn't really have a reason to pull it a second time. All the predictions are that it will be overwhelmingly rejected. It is what then comes that is completely unsure. Now, there is one side of the equation which says that the Labour Party will push a vote of no confidence. That will fail because Conservative MPs will somehow rally to Theresa May's position. At that point, Labour will switch to supporting a second referendum. And at that point, enough Conservative MPs will peel off to back the second referendum proposal to make it pass through the House of Commons, and that will oblige a postponement of Article 50. That is one possible line. I don't personally think this. I think it would be very difficult to hold a referendum, a second referendum, in a situation where the government, the Prime Minister, is clearly opposed to it, and the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, has made pretty clear that he's opposed to it also. So I think what is more likely to happen, this is my guess, is that we will see the Theresa May's proposal fail. We will see a vote of no confidence, which will be defeated. We will see certain token votes over the next couple of weeks, some of which might push for a second referendum, but which the government will ignore. Article 50 will not be extended because I think that Theresa May understands that her political position and the future of the Conservative Party would be gravely jeopardized if Article 50 was extended. And we will see Britain leave on the 29th of March, according to the existing timetable, probably with no deal. Now, that is what I think is the more likely outcome. But I want to stress that I am not absolutely sure. I don't know for sure. I don't think anybody knows for sure. In fact, I am sure that nobody knows for sure, because there are far too many variables in this picture to be able to say with any confidence. What I will say is that, of course, because of the incompetent way that Theresa May negotiated Brexit, something which we have been talking about on the Duran for months, this has opened up the whole question of whether there should be a Brexit at all, despite the 2016 referendum decision. And I didn't expect that to be the case. If you'd asked me whether this was going to be the case a year ago, I never imagined it would be. It just shows what a bad fist of the negotiations Theresa May has made.
You know, the interesting thing for me, from the outside looking in, obviously Theresa May is a very failed politician in every possible way, by any measure, okay? Yeah. But that's all fine, okay? That's fine. What really bothers me, and the belief in democracy is already quite shaken in the West because there's a huge democracy deficit between the ruling elites and the voter. I think that calling for a second referendum would be devastating, absolutely devastating. And I think it would be infuriating, irrespective of how you feel about Brexit. It's an insult to popular democracy. And so the people were wrong. Now they have to, like children, be taken by the hand and go to the ballot box again. Now do what's the right thing now. That is insult, okay? Particularly from a country like Britain that gives the Western world so many traditions and good ones that are being eroded away by selfish elites, all right? So I think that the damage it would be done to the institutions and the ideas of popular voting, of a franchise, would be devastating.
Can I just say, Peter, I am entirely of the same view. I have spoken about this many times, and there is a fascinating article by Diana Johnston talking about the protests in France, to which we provided a link on the Duran, in which she makes a direct connection between the Yellow Vest protests in France and the way that France also set aside a referendum result on the European Constitution and basically went ahead with it despite it being rejected in a referendum by the French people. And she makes the point that this created a disillusion, a sense of disillusion and a sense of distance and antagonism between the French people and the French elite, which has not existed before. And I have to say, looking at the situation in France, I do wonder whether in 10 years' time, or even sooner, actually, much sooner probably, we could find ourselves in Britain in the same place.
Yeah, good point.
All right, we're finishing up an hour in. Thank you guys for joining us. Everyone that came here, we know that there was no notification sent for this live chat, so we really appreciate everyone that's showing up for this live show. And let's get to Yellow Vests. Peter, a question from the chat. Will there be an Act 10 Yellow Vest protest?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is not going to go away. This is not going to go away. You know why? Because people are suffering. This is not arguing over a national anthem, okay? This is not arguing over some kind of metaphysical idea. No, people are hurting. And the system is the problem. It's supposed to be there to protect people. So it's not providing. Remember the whole EU mantra, security and prosperity. It's delivering on neither right now. And people have had enough. I think, at least the three of us here, I accept that there are going to be fabulously wealthy people in the world. Fine, okay? But I do not accept that a middle class, everything about how we define a middle class is being destroyed and humiliated with every passing day. And there's a system in place that intentionally destroys your sense of nationality, your sense of being in a community. And people are under attack. They're under assault. So yeah, Act 10 and keep going forward. The political elites have to wake up. They have done very fine, very well. 2008. The rest of us have had to struggle. And I admire the Yellow Vests, okay? The ones that want to see a better country, not a better European Union, maybe a better Paris or a better where they live in. Over the last offices, schools, lost the 2 jobs they have to have. These people have been completely ignored. That's the flyover. That's the flyover region of France. It's been ignored, and people are saying enough is enough. And they've got one thing left. They've got the vote. And next time they go and vote, and there are podcasts like this, so it's not rigged again by the vanity media in France that back this unknown mama's boy Macron. Okay, France is in big trouble, and it's an example for the rest of the European Union of what not to do. because it starts there. At least I'll give that to the French. The French have given us a lot of traditions, not always the best ones, but they've given us a lot of traditions.
All right, Alexander, your take on the yellow vests. Act 10 coming?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. In fact, these latest moves by the Macron government, the Macron and Philippe government, to stamp them out, are going to provoke further protests and risk making this thing spiral even further out of control than it is already. I mean, it is quite extraordinary to me how the authoritarian instincts, if you like, of the neoliberal order are asserting themselves the moment it faces a real popular challenge of this kind. And I have no doubt that's what we're going to see over the next few weeks. And certainly we're going to see it next weekend.
You know, just one more thing here, because I think it's really important, something I was thinking about after we did crosstalk earlier today. You know, the establishment media likes to bandy around with this term populism. Let's be clear here. Populism isn't an ideology, okay? It's made out to be one. It's not. It's a form of political action. And if we use the term populism, it can be expressed in a wide variety of ways, and it is right now all across Europe. So don't be fooled by the establishment legacy press and the deep state that, you know, these are populists, which of course is a very negative term. No, these are acting out in a populist ways. Country to country, the ideas are different because the experiences are different. So don't be fooled by the term populism.
All right, guys, share the channel with everybody you know. Click that like button. Reckless Abandon, Alexander, this is for you. And I know Peter's going to also jump in on this because he's going to have a lot to say. Reckless Abandon says the NewsGuard app says,
oh yeah,
this is what the NewsGuard says, guys. A pro-Russia website that has published false information and conspiracy theories. Alexander, I'll start with you. Peter, I know you're going to jump in, and you guys are going to have a lot to say about this. NewsGuard, which I also would like to say is staffed and is headed by a who's who list of neocons, but they are striking deals with Facebook. They're striking deals with Twitter. They're striking deals with public schools and the school system and the university system in the United States as well to get their Chrome extension added to just about every computer, laptop, network they can get to. So this is a big deal, and of course they're going to be gunning for channels and sites like ours as well.
And they're starting with the United States, and they have global ambitions. Go ahead, Alexander Mercouris.
Absolutely, and I mean, first of all, can I make it very clear that that description certainly does not apply to us. We do not engage in conspiracy theories. Every so often, we report conspiracy facts because conspiracies do sometimes happen in the real world, but we do not engage in wild and fanciful speculations of the kind that you see in many places, including over the Russiagate affair, dare I say it, in the mainstream media. We are actually here to rebut that kind of thinking. But I find this a most sinister development, actually, because once upon a time, not so very long ago, the whole point about the public space in the West was that it was free. You'd have a different people expressing different views. Now we see people coming along, trying to police it, trying to impose censorship, trying to impose control, trying to decide which theories are legitimate and which are not, conjuring up the bogey or specter of Russia in order to justify this kind of policing, which now extends to all sorts of people. I mean, even people like, I don't know, Tulsi Gabbard, I'm pretty sure in the United States is going to be subjected to this kind of attack before long. And I think this is a very sinister development. I think it's a sinister development, not just for us. I think it is a sinister development for everybody. And I spoke about the authoritarian tendencies, which are now coming to the fore. And here we see another example. And we've also seen with the Integrity Initiative in Britain, the attempts to control the media space and control the conversation. And this is an even more overt example of that.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously RT is one of their targets. Okay. And
promotional material, actually, Peter. They actually put RT, and Records Abandoned noted that as well, one of the members of the chat. They actually have RT in the promotional material.
Yeah, I saw some of their analysis, news guards, in CNN and Wall Street Journal. They get a blue shield. I'm sorry, a green shield, and RT gets a red one. This is all about controlling the narrative. What's insidious about this? Look, governments always want to control the narrative, always, okay? And it doesn't matter the technology that you have, okay? They always want to have their own narrative. But what's really insidious now is that you have a social media landscape that is in lockstep with the state, okay? Look, I mean, Facebook outsources well, to say it, censorship tools to the Atlantic Council. I mean, really, that's like letting the fox into the henhouse, okay? So you have social media companies, and then you have an entire class of pliant stenographers. It would be an insult to call them journalists, because there are real journalists. Joe Lauria is one of my favorites. Gareth Porter. We've already heard Caitlin Johnston. We've already mentioned her name here. These are great people. They have integrity. Not like the Integrity Initiative, but it's really a cast of characters that it really makes this very scary. And I'm afraid, depending on how things go, that we'll be telling our children and grandchildren about the golden age of the internet. Because what's going to happen here is that people will find other ways. The dark net. I've never been there, but we could see people communicating outside of these officially accepted and controlled avenues here. And that's when you're going to create a lot more distrust. I mean, there's a lot of dissent out there, and there's dissent out there for a good reason, because look what WikiLeaks did for us. I know both of you. I remember, Christoforou, and you were living here. I remember we were going through some of the WikiLeaks, and I remember sitting with you in a cafe, and we were both said, okay, we didn't know all these details, but we had a good feeling all of this was going on. And it made us feel like, we're really not crazy, okay? It's just really how the world does work, how people try to control it, okay? NewsGuard, this is a very, very vicious attempt to curb free speech. Essentially what they want approved speech. And that will be acceptable if they approve your speech. And who will approve their approval? That's the problem.
So, Peter, following up on that, Beatrix asks a question. Where's the breaking point? You have the walkaway movement, but everyone who pulls away from the mainstream gets attacked, the Duran included. You
have to keep fighting. Okay, I mean, it's worth it for me. It's worth it for me. Okay, I'm all in. Okay, I'm not going to compromise with these people, because I have a moral stance here. All right, and it's a principled stance. No, you can't offer me a lot of money and I'll flip and do your propaganda for you. No, I just won't do that. I will never do that, okay? Because I wake up in the morning and look in the mirror when I shave, and I have a good conscience, okay? I've talked to enough Western journalists on the side, having a drink, and, why do you do it? Well, institutional pressure, peer pressure, career, okay, all kinds of things like that. We really live in an environment where it's the death of outrage, okay? Because these people in the establishment, they're part of it. They're part of this narrative that is being pitched, and they can live with themselves. I say we keep on fighting, because we actually have a lot of people that agree with us, all right? And I think we are a part of a forward-looking movement to keep freedom of speech, and believe me, I hear a lot of things that I hate, and I'm offended all of the time, but I would rather live in this environment than live in one that is controlled by corporate elites and interests that want to control the status quo. These people have nothing to do, and I don't use these words very often, have much to do with liberty.
All right, Alexander, we have a super chat from Penguins fan. What do you think will happen in Syria?
Well, I've said what I think about the short term, and can I just say I am pretty sure that in the not so very long term, I'm talking about a year, we will see the Syrian government back in control of all of Syria, including the Kurdish regions and including Idlib province. And it will be substantially the same Syrian government that we have now, despite this constitutional negotiation that is supposed to be happening. The political structure will be very similar to the one we have now, and Bashar al-Assad will still be the president. That is what I expect is going to happen. Now, getting to that point is going to be complicated, but the two key players are the Russians and the Turks, and we can see a consensus, or if you like, a community of interests between these two major powers now, that is for them the best outcome that can be achieved. Turkey had much more grandiose ambitions in Syria once upon a time. I mean, it did want to see regime change in Damascus. It now understands that isn't going to happen. It understands that, I think, playing this very complicated game it's been playing in northwest Syria with various jihadi groups isn't working out for Turkey. It doesn't want to see an autonomous US-backed Kurdish statelet in northeast Syria. So I think from their point of view, the Turkish point of view, it is better to see some kind of reunited Syria with the Russians there looking after Turkish interests, and at the same time with Turkey having resumed its connection with Syria in a way that protects Turkish influence there. So I think that is the outcome in the not so long term now. That is what I predict is going to happen. I think we are almost now at the end of this war.
You know, two things on that. Number one, don't read Western media about Syria because it's completely distorted. Alexander Mercouris is absolutely right. The post-war Syria, maybe the first time I've said that in a long time, it's being made right now, and it's being made without the United States. There's so much going on with the Russians, with the Syrian government, with Iran, and I think, and we've mentioned this before, it looks like in a matter of months, Syria will be back in the Arab League. That's a major milestone right there. Things are being done in the region, okay? Number two, who has put themselves into the spotlight and become a target? Erdogan. Now you're going to see the Saudis, UAE, everyone else. They don't want to see Turkey have a strategic win in Syria. So what are they going to do? They will embrace Assad again and his government, okay? Because they would rather see Assad stay in a stable Syria than to see Erdogan get a major victory. So Erdogan, you know, the Israelis are pissed off with them. Okay, the Saudis certainly are because of Khashoggi. And what they want to do is they're going to say, look, Syria's done, okay? And they do not want to give a strategic victory to Erdogan because Erdogan is very erratic, okay? But when, you know, when Trump made his decision that the U.S. would pull out, and they will pull out, okay? I really like that. One of the headlines at antiwar.com is that Defense Department, we don't take orders from Bolton, okay? And it shows the tension there also because Erdogan was playing a game of bluff and bluster. And when Trump made that announcement, all of a sudden, Turkey had to start thinking about real strategic moves. It was not prepared to do that. So they really had to hustle on that. And with the Saudis saying basically and all of their allies to say, look, game's up. We don't want the Turks to win here. We better let Assad win. All right. And I think that's going to be the outcome.
Peter, following up on that, Penguins sent a super chat asking, why are liberals against Assad in Syria? Good question.
Yeah, it's
so pro-war. Why are they against this? Not why?
Well, you know, I suggest everybody to take a look over at the Intercept, as Glenn Wald wrote a fascinating, absolutely fascinating piece the last couple of days about how this happened, and it's really historical change. You know, the thing is that we really don't know because of the Trump element, because you get the politics of revenge and hate. And remember, when you hate, you're blinded. You do not have rational thought when you have hate. And it's because, well, Trump wants to pull out of troops out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, out of Syria. Oh, well, if Trump wants to do that, then I must be against it because I'm against Trump. It's a very Manichaean in thinking. But broadly speaking, what happened to the anti-war movement, I suppose, is really the question. Because in 2003, all through, particularly in Europe, but also in the United States, there was very strong anti-war sentiment. Now that has seemed to have evaporated away. And now, because in the age of Trump, liberals being against Trump in any way, shape, or form are going to be against his foreign policy, which in some instances are quite rational and in American national interest. So this is this kind of perversion of logic right now. But clearly, and also one other interesting and important element, if not maybe even the most important one in answering this question, is that the neocons have basically withdrawing their support for always Trumpers and going to the Democratic Party. So you have this marriage of the liberals and the neocons. So they're going around, you know, instead of meeting each other, they're meeting around in the back. Okay, quite like literally and kind of in a conspiratorial way. You know the Bill Kristols and you know Max Boot. You know, always wrong Max Boot. You know, they're courting now the Democrats because they're never Trumpers, okay? And neocons are neocons. They want power. They want influence of policymaking. They don't care what party it is. That's what they're showing us right now. So this is a very bizarre marriage because, you know, I'm probably one of the oldest persons participating and watching this podcast. I mean, it was always the Democrats that were soft on national security, and the Republicans were always very strong. That was always what they played in elections. Now things appear to be turning around because we have people like Rand Paul, which, you know, kudos to him. He's an awesome guy. I didn't really like his op-ed about Israel, but, you know, we always have things we don't like about a politician. But this is a very, very strange time that we live in because it's a really, there's a variety of strange bedfellows when it comes to foreign policy in the United States.
All right, Imra sent a super chat. Eva Bartlett and the likes have done great reports about Syria. You've had Eva Bartlett on Crosstalk. She has done great reports. Tulsi Gabbard, Alexander, Peter, 2020. What do you think of her throwing her hat in the ring?
She's a hawk. She's a real hawkish person. Okay. She disagrees with her own party's position on Trump's decision to pull out of Syria. Okay, kudos to her. That's fine with me. But on a lot of other things, she's just very rank and file. I think she's going to use that as her feather in her hat. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But it's certainly what she understands intuitively, and I think Donald Trump does too, but he doesn't act always on it, is that there is a anti-war sentiment among American voters. We've talked about this on this podcast before. It is quite possible in a number of congressional districts where there's a high number of veterans or former veterans or families of veterans that are sick and tired of this endless wars because they're the ones that pay in blood and the taxpayer pays in treasure. So there is a sentiment out there. Is that enough to push her into, vault her into the primaries? I tend to doubt it. Remember, folks, the propaganda machine of the establishment with their backers in the deep state and people that call themselves journalists, it's very, very powerful. You know, the people that come and listen to us are the exception for now. I hope that will change as we go forward. But you know, the empire sells, empire's popular. It's glorified in the media, in our entertainment, all of the time. Empire is so deeply ingrained in the DNA right now that someone like Tulsi will have a very, very hard time pushing against it.
All right, Alexander, what do you make of Tulsi 2020? And
I agree with everything that Peter has said, and I'm going to say something else. I don't think she's going to come anywhere close to becoming either the Democratic Party's candidate or the president or anything like that. I think she will perhaps make a few movements at the beginning, and I think very, very quickly she will fade out. I don't think she has the political weight within the Democratic Party to basically move forward, and I don't think she has the political skills and the sheer personality that Donald Trump, whatever you think of him, has, which enabled him to break through. So I think this will be a marginal candidate by somebody who I just don't think is anywhere close to the center of political power in the United States.
You know what? You know, I could just see her. I could see her at one of the Democratic candidates' debates, the first one. You know, and she'll be asked a question about Syria from a non-serious journalist, probably somebody from CNN, and they'll say, why did you support Donald Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Syria? And she'll say, well, we were there illegally in the first place. The assets that we had in Syria weren't actually fighting ISIS. It took Russia 6 weeks and 30 planes. They essentially destroyed the caliphate. So I think that, you know, it was a good idea to pull out because we never should have been there in the first place. You know what the reaction of the crowd, the other Democratic candidates in the media will be? They will blow a fuse. They'll say she's mentally deranged. Though everything that I parenthetically said that she said during the debate was true. See, it will be incomprehensible to a wider audience because they've never heard those words and that logic ever applied.
All right, very quickly, guys, I wanted to also ask you, Alexander and Peter, your very, very quick thoughts. Ruth Ginsburg, Trump may have another Supreme Court judge on the way. What do you think very quickly? What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I think that, well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know what the position with Ginsburg is, but I mean, this is going to be Donald Trump's biggest legacy because he's been very fortunate in these Supreme Court vacancies coming his way at this time. I predict, by the way, that this time, if Ginsburg does step down, that it will be that he'll look for a woman. That Donald Trump will look for a woman.
Absolutely.
And there are lots of outstanding lawyers and judges in the United States who Donald Trump could propose for that post. I have no idea who's going to be.
I think we already know who it's.
We know, Peter.
No, I think we know who it is. It's Amy. What's her name?
Okay. Yeah.
Barrett?
Yeah, Amy Barrett.
Yeah, I mean, from what I could tell, the gossip in Washington is that don't worry, Amy, you're next. Okay.
Yeah.
And so let's watch the Democrats crucify a religious woman.
Yes.
I think she has 8 children. I don't know if they're all of her own, but she has a very large family. She apparently has an absolutely sterling judicial record.
Yes.
It's going to be real. This, and I was thinking about it for some reason yesterday going out, and the spectacle against Kavanaugh for me is still a very raw wound, very raw. I mean, I've never seen anything like that in my life in politics. I wonder what they're going to try to dig up on her and try to convince the public that she is unfit to sit on the bench. It will be very, very ugly, but she will get it.
Yes,
I mean, if he nominates someone like that, it will pass.
I think that's right, and I'm going to say something else, which is I think that this time the Republican Party, which is now in solid control of the Senate, will not let the same thing happen to her that happened to Kavanaugh. I think this time round they're going to play a much tougher game than they did that time, and I think I'm right in saying that Lindsey Graham is taking over the Senate Judiciary Committee from Grassley. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's the case. And I think he's not the sort of person who is going to try and be as even-handed as Grassley, I think to his regret, tried to be.
All right, this is a big question for Penguins fan, a super chat. Why did Obama, Kerry, France, and Britain want Assad gone?
That is a very good question.
Very big question, too.
It's a very, very big question.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you repeat?
Why did, one second, let me pull it up again. Why did Obama, Kerry, France, and Britain want Assad gone?
Yes. Well, let's talk about France first, because, of course, France is the former colonial power in Syria, which is, I think, important thing to remember about this. I mean, the French used to rule Syria. They used to rule Lebanon also, which was at that time under the French control. That was part of Syria, essentially.
Transjordan.
Transjordan, exactly. So the French would, have an interest in Syria, and they are always looking to reassert their position in the Middle East. And I think they have various connections with all sorts of people in Syria. And they didn't like Bashar al-Assad because, of course, he was an assertive and independent figure, not somebody at all beholden to France. And if anything, if he had any political or other connections to any Western country, it was actually to Britain, where he had actually worked for a while as an ophthalmologist. So, one can see that role in France. But I think ultimately it comes back to this ideological issue that both France and Britain, the elites in these countries, have become very, very, how shall I say, identified with and bound up in this concept of humanitarian war and a liberal internationalism and humanitarianism. And there's always been a very strong ideological impulse here. And of course, I think that Syria fell well within the sights, and that was one reason why it happened. All three countries, Britain, France, and the United States, have also very, very close relations with Syria's enemies, which are Saudi Arabia and Israel. So, in a sense, it's not surprising that they were all part of this coalition to try and get rid of President Assad. In the case of Britain, they are the ones, by the way, more than France, I think, which is now trying to dig in on this policy and is the most resistant to changing it.
Yeah, and also there's this myth that has deep roots. Is that, well, if you can control or have a friendly Western regime in Damascus, they will cut the Shia crescent from Iraq all the way to Lebanon. And this is really stupid. I mean, if Iran wants to send something to Lebanon, it can put it on an airplane and fly it directly to Beirut. Okay, this is a ridiculous thing to be pushing all of the time. It's just absolutely a myth. It's silly. And this came from the think tanks in Washington. We have to break this crescent, because it's expanding influence. No, it's not true at all. Okay, and we can make a separate podcast. Why Hezbollah exists in the first place? It exists because of Israel. Israel indirectly created Hezbollah. Hezbollah fought to get rid of Israeli occupation that lasted for 20 years in southern Lebanon, and it is a very, very popular one. Speaking of which, Pompeo went crazy in Cairo talking about Hezbollah, which apparently he doesn't know very much about. It is part of the political fabric of Lebanon. It has elected members of parliament, and even Christian minorities in Lebanon vote for Hezbollah, okay, because they defend the country's sovereignty.
And we'll have a video on the Pompeo speech coming up this week as well that I did with Peter. So we'll have that going on as well. Check that out. Guys, over 1,000 viewers. Thank you very much. That's without a notification getting sent. That's awesome. Thank you for tuning in to this live chat. We have a super chat from Ogluck. Alexander, an update on Somalia and Russia policy in the region.
Somalia and Russia policy? You mean in the Horn of Africa, Russian policy? Yeah. In Somalia, I think the Russians are not very active in Somalia. They have had a long-standing relationship with Ethiopia, and they have a fairly good relationship with Eritrea. I should say the Russian connection with Ethiopia goes back a long, long time, back to the time of the Tsarist Empire, when the former Ethiopian monarch, Menelik II, looked to Russia as his primary ally against the colonial powers. So, and of course, the Coptic Church in Ethiopia has some resemblance, not perhaps quite as strong as some people think, to the Orthodox churches like the one in Russia. Now, the Russians were involved in a big way in the Horn of Africa during the Cold War. At one time, they supported Somalia and the Somali government of President Siad Barre, who was the ruler of Somalia. He came to power in 1969, and he remained president of Somalia until the 1990s, when he fell. And at that point, as we know, there's been a prolonged crisis in Somalia, which has been abating, but is not, I think, fully over. And then the Russians also eventually fell out with Siad Barre and switched to supporting the Mengistu government in Ethiopia in the 1970s, and they remained Ethiopia's major sponsor right up until basically the fall of the Soviet Union. But the Russians have nothing like that kind of interest in the Horn of Africa now. The Russians do have a sort of residual influence to deal with a sort of piracy that proliferates in that area. But as I say, it's not their major concern. The country which is concerned with the Horn of Africa, apart from the United States and France, which has a presence, which both the presences there, is China, which has opened a base in Djibouti, which is this Somali-speaking city-state in the Horn of Africa, and which the United States and the Western powers are extremely unhappy about, to see a Chinese base there. And I think realistically, if you're looking at the situation in the Horn of Africa, and you're looking at Somalia, and you want to look at a country with long-term interests in that area, which is not the United States, then it's not Russia you should be looking at, it's China.
All right, we'll keep this going.
Man,
guys.
what an encyclopedic answer. Whoa. I'm gonna write in a super chat for that one there. Thank you. I learned something.
The Oracle of London. Thank you very much, Alexander. We'll keep this going for about another, what do you guys say, another 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, 5-10 minutes.
All right, guys. Let's keep this going for a little bit longer. Peter, we have a question from Peta Grieve. What happened to the text messages on Wiener's laptop? Why is this not getting investigated? Is the FBI an enemy of the United States?
No, the FBI it protects the secrets of the deep state. That's its purpose right now, and it's patently obvious. I mean, there's so many things that have come out over the last 2 years. Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation, behavior of senior officials at the FBI and the DOJ, Sally Yates and unmasking and all. That's the real story here. And Mueller is looking at everything except the real story here. Anthony Weiner, I think they probably thought he's suffered enough. And Uma Abedin, I'm just going to suppose here, she probably knows way too much, and she's probably saying enough is enough. Okay, let it pass. He's out of the way. He's not going to bother anyone anymore.
Carlos Danger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but that's a really good question, because it really gets to the core of what the elites are what their purpose is, and their purpose is not to create a tranquil union, but it is to protect the wrongdoing of the rich and powerful around them. Okay, it's as simple as that. There is a two-tier justice system, not only in the United States, but in the Western world in general. I mean, there are privileged people and there are people with no privileges, okay? And this gets to the very core of the discontent so many people have. I remember watching reports in 2008 when the financial crisis came, and all across Europe and in the United States, people found themselves bankrupt, but they didn't do anything wrong. What happened? I mean, it destroyed lives and livelihoods and families, okay? And no one was held account. But the same people that created this crisis, they doubled their money and more. Okay, and I think there's a very strong lingering feeling of injustice. Like him or hate him, Donald Trump represents that. The yellow vests represents that. The yellow vests have not completely articulated their demands, but they know one thing: they're angry and they feel betrayed.
Alexander, we had a question earlier in the chat, way in the beginning, from Mr. Ballbuster. Great name. The Eurobond, Ukraine, and Russia, the debt that's owed to Russia. What's going on with that?
Is this about the can you ask the question again?
The Eurobond that's owed to Russia.
Yes. Okay. So there was
you don't hear much about it.
Yes, there was a big court case. The Russian National Welfare Fund, which actually loaned the money to Ukraine, brought a case in the High Court against Ukraine. It sought what is called summary judgment. Now, summary judgment means a case where it says that Ukraine has no legal defense and therefore we should have judgment right away. The High Court, the judge in the High Court, who is a Mr. Justice Blair, he is, by the way, the brother of Tony Blair, for people's interest. Anyway, he sided completely with Russia and gave Russia summary judgment. The Ukrainians then appealed to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal agreed with the Russians on every point but one, which is, I think they said, that, some actions that Russia might have taken might have undermined the position of Ukraine in paying this Eurobond. And this would be an issue that should go forward to trial. I think a lot of people, by the way, were surprised by that decision. And the last I heard was that the Russians are appealing that to the Supreme Court, the highest court in Britain. If the Russians lose that appeal, then there will be a trial of the issue, a full trial of the issue, which I think most people looking at this expect the Russians to win. So these legal maneuvers bought Ukraine a little time in the Court of Appeal, but perhaps they won't change the outcome of the case in the end. That little time, though, has helped Ukraine because it is in very heavy debt at the moment. It has a lot of money to pay. It's struggling to do so. If that decision in the British courts finally goes against Ukraine, Ukraine must either pay the money or be declared in default, since it would be in default to a member of the Paris Club. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of what that means, but suffice to say that Russia is a privileged creditor.
Absolutely.
Because it is a member of the so-called Paris Club. According to IMF rules, the IMF then has to stop lending to Ukraine because it cannot continue to lend money to a country that is in default on a loan owed to a member of the Paris Club. So it's a high stakes game for Ukraine. The Court of Appeal threw the Ukraine a lifeline, but it may not be one that helps Ukraine very much in the end.
An interesting thing about the Paris Club, Russia had to pay off Soviet debts, and the Paris Club, much to its chagrin, Russia wanted to pay off its debts early, and the Paris Club said no because they wanted to earn the interest on it. So, I mean, it was that was the only time the Paris Club, privileged position, because the Russians paid every penny owed. Okay, and they did it early. Well, they didn't do it early because they weren't allowed to, but they were prepared to do that. And another thing here, I'm not surprised all of this happened, and I'm glad we have Alexander Mercouris here to explain it, because when the Russians make a loan agreement to the Ukrainians, they make sure it's bulletproof, okay? Western financial institutions are going to find out the hard way in dealing with Ukraine. That's why the provisions of the loans and all the other financial instruments were, I'm sure they were very thick documents, because the Russians have been dealing with the Ukrainians a long time, and they know how they could try to wiggle through, use foreign courts, all kinds of things. But the Russians got this one nailed.
All right. From Vincent Verona, Peter, do you think that China is close to reaching 80% parity with the US in terms of urban population, resource allocation, and cutting edge technology?
Yeah, I think so. As a matter of fact, I mean, depending on how you want to slice and dice an economy, I mean, I think it's quite clear that China is at parity with the United States. I mean, everybody likes to use this GDP thing and all that. It doesn't tell the whole story, okay? And I think what's really interesting is, and we go back to the attack on the Chinese telecommunications company, the Chinese are moving very far ahead and quickly when it comes to technology, IA and things like that. So this is one of the things that the West is very concerned with. The United States putting a lot of pressure on European countries not to buy Chinese products that are very good, high tech, very affordable. They're very afraid of that right now. The most important story is for this year, I think overall, the real story is to see how China and the United States interact with each other. Because when the quote unquote trade war started, it really brought the Chinese out on the stage. And many of us for many years have said, the Chinese are not pulling their weight on the global stage politically akin to its power and assets. That's changed. That changed at the very end of last year, and I think it's going to come into full bloom this year. You and I did a separate video on that. It's really up to the United States how it wants to react, not to the rise of China, but the return of China in what it believes is its rightful place in the global scheme of things.
Yeah, that video is the Thucydides trap video. We encourage you guys to check that out. Let's do a couple more questions and we'll wrap this up for our live chat 21. Click on the like button, guys. Share the channel with everybody you know. Of course, you can go to the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, help us out. And you can donate to our PayPal or Patreon page. The links to those pages are in the description box down below. And also remember that you can get all our video shows on audio format as well. So follow us on iTunes and SoundCloud. We have a super chat from Afterglow. Alexander, we keep hearing about the end of the petrodollar. Will it happen? If so, when?
Yes, I think it will happen, and probably not before very long, because now we have the world's major, one of the world's major oil producers, which is of course Russia, which has been sanctioned by the United States and is therefore taking active measures to diversify out of the dollar. It disposed of a large tranche of its treasury, of its remaining dollar reserves. It's now piling up Chinese currency reserves in place of this. And the Russians are talking about entering into agreements with third-party countries to sell their oil and gas in local currencies rather than dollars. And of course, another major oil producer, which is Iran, which finds itself in the same situation. And I gather that there's now a payment mechanism being negotiated between Iran and India for Iran to sell oil to India and to receive payment not through dollars, but presumably rupees. So we are seeing the first steps being taken to move away from the petrodollar. And I think this is very important because one of the key reasons why the dollar is the reserve currency, and in my opinion, actually, the single most important reason is because up to now, oil has been traded in dollars. If you want to buy oil, you have to buy it in dollars. Since oil is the most widely traded commodity and is the commodity without which an industrial system simply cannot function, that has obliged every country around the world to have dollars. If they no longer need to pay for their oil in dollars and they start diversifying into other currencies, it will lead first, I think, to the end of the petrodollar. Secondly, it will lead to a change in oil price dynamics which are very affected by monetary policy in the United States, which is because, as I said, oil is priced in dollars, but in the not so long term beyond that, it will lead to people increasingly questioning whether the dollar deserves the reserve currency status it now has.
And it's because the United States has decided to weaponize the dollar, to use it as a political weapon, is the reason why people will leave it. This is a self-inflicted wound. As always, the law of unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
This, we've always talked on these podcasts, and people ask us all the time about the military balance and all that. What the glue of the empire is the dollar, and the U.S. is destroying or devaluing its own currency for blind political objectives like Iran, okay? They're destroying, and as a result, people are saying they don't trust the dollar because they don't trust how the originating country of the dollar, the United States, uses its own currency. It's a completely idiotic, self-inflicted wound.
All right, let's knock out these last questions real quickly. Let's try to get to these questions quickly because we have some pretty good topics here. But Peter, from Michael Julian, Peter, is Russia now going to give Syria Defense Ministry the remaining pieces of the S-300 package, the AWACS, the MiG-31s, interceptors, etc., to defend itself from hostile Air Force shootings into Syria? So is Russia going to help Syria defend itself from shootings? I
think that I'm sure that has already been very thoroughly and thoughtfully worked out. I think that what the Russians will give Damascus whatever it needs, not necessarily what it wants, but how Russia sees its necessary defense needs are, and Russia will back up those commitments and stay with them. Okay, so what is necessary will be provided.
All right, and from Hersey would like to know, this is a big topic, but we're going to get a quick answer from both of you guys. May you briefly talk about Palestine and Israel? Is there a possibility for an ultimate peace? Do you guys think there is a possibility in the future for an ultimate peace?
Yes, there is, but there has to be a change in Israeli policy. What needs to happen for there to be a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians is for the Israelis to stop seeking what is essentially victory over the Palestinians and to start negotiating seriously for peace. Now, I'm not sure what form that peace is going to take. Once upon a time, I supported the two-state solution. I think that has been so undermined now that I don't really know whether that's practical any longer. But sooner or later, there will be some kind of a peace in the region, because the point, this is my own view, of peak Israeli power has now passed. I think that from now on, the balance is going to start shifting further and further away against Israel. And I think that is going to start making the Israelis eventually reconsider these maximalist objectives, which they have been following ever since they found that they could do in the 1960s.
Yeah, absolutely. That was an excellent answer there. And there was already the 2002 Saudi initiative that all Arab countries would recognize Israel for a Palestinian state. But because of the reckless and fanatical policies of the Likud coalition, we've had, the West Bank is being colonized here. I mean, Israel, again, should be from its very inception to the present, always worry what it wishes for, because a two-state solution now is probably unlikely. It's a one-state solution, and Israel is going to have to take a look in the mirror and give citizenship to everyone. And after everything that has happened, that is going to be very, very. It's like it's akin to the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation. I mean, it is recognizing the equality of people that live within the area that you control. That is a huge, huge step for them to take. And so also, I think we have to say the obvious. If the United States had a rational policy regarding Palestine, Israel would do what it was told eventually, but it's wagged the dog, unfortunately. We know from WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton said, I'm paraphrasing here, we have to destroy Syria for Israel, okay? that is the short-term myopic political thinking that comes out of Washington. Israel is not a friend, and it's not a strategic asset. The United States gets nothing from that relationship except for immense reputational harm on the global stage. Every September, voting for a Palestinian state, the U.S. and a few other countries that it bribes, payoffs, or threatens, votes against, and the General Assembly overwhelmingly, vastly overwhelmingly votes for it. The United States is very much alone in many respects today. And it wakes up and a lot of strategic atom, wasting so much money. It needs to build a wall, and it needs to build infrastructure.
There you go. Is Damascus ready for tourists? Actually, Peter, I was on Instagram of Vanessa Beasley. I believe that's her name. Yeah. Beasley. She was sending photographs of her time now in Damascus and Aleppo.
I must have missed that.
Normal life is back.
I must have missed that story on CNN.
Exactly.
I must have missed that on MSNBC, where Syrian Christians celebrated another Christmas, their second Christmas, after being liberated from jihadists. But I'm sure CNN will be there this year. Okay. Oh, it is just, again, the audacity. All you hear about is barrel bombs. Well, they have Christmas trees in Aleppo. Yes, you can go to Aleppo as a tourist. You can go to Damascus as a tourist. You can go to a good part of Syria as a tourist. All right? I mean, you never hear what really happens. All you hear are these platitudes and propaganda about Syria.
There you go. And on that note, we will wrap up this live chat. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us today. And once again, we apologize, out of our control, that the notifications were not sent out. But guys, we hit over 1,000 viewers as well, 1,100, I believe, at one point. So thank you to everybody who tuned into this live chat. We really, really appreciate your support. We appreciate it very, very, very much. And of course, guys, click the like button and share the channel with everybody that you know. Let's get people into these conversations as well and get some real news out to them. Peter, what are you looking at in the week? What are you looking forward to? Outside of Brexit.
Outside of Brexit, no. I want this to end. I want this to end. I'm tired of this story. I know I'm going to be on the phone and WhatsApp with Alexander Mercouris. He's going to hate me this week. Hate me. I apologize in advance.
Apology accepted. The people to blame are our parliamentarians. I mean, we are in an awful mess. I will have to watch Brexit, obviously. I think there's a lot going on in the United States also, with Trump, the wall, the shutdown, the latest non-scandals around Russiagate, which, I mean, we will no doubt be discussing in videos, Alex, but which amount to absolutely zero, in my opinion. And of course, we also have to look at the situation in France, which is becoming, as I said, very serious all the time.
Yeah, very good. Very good. All right. In Moscow, Mr. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. I was getting ahead of myself. We have the editor-in-chief of the Duran, Mr. Alexander Mercouris, somewhere in the UK at an undisclosed location. There you go. Thank you guys to everybody that tuned into this live chat. We really appreciate it. Wherever you are in the world, we hope you have a very, very good Sunday and a very good weekend, whatever remains of it. Peter, who is the third guest over there? The fourth guest.
This is Buddy. He's 1 year old.
And to Buddy, the
crazy Chihuahua.
The crazy Chihuahua. The crazy Chihuahua in Moscow.
Yes, all right, he runs my life, this little guy, little troublemaker.
All right. So Buddy gives everybody as well his best regards. And to everybody out there in the world, be safe and have a really good Sunday. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.